I am so excited about this week's Bible study. This week we are in Genesis 16, and I titled this Bible study, Don't Rush the Promise of God, or Don't Rush the Promise. And if you stay tuned, you're going to see why. We shouldn't rush the promise of God. So, hopefully we won't be here that long tonight. I'm going to try not to be long-winded tonight. I'm going to try my best. But like I said, we are in Genesis chapter 16. And the title in my Bible names it The Birth of Ishmael. We're not going to talk a whole lot about Ishmael, but we are, we'll just kind of talk a little bit. There are so many lessons in Genesis 16. So much that we can learn from Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. And so let's just get started. So, the very first verse says, "Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar." And y'all, when I first read this, I immediately thought back to Genesis chapter 11. And I don't know if you all have noticed this when you're studying the Bible. The Bible just give you some random, well, not random, but it just seems like some information will be given to you and no context behind it until you start reading further, and you be like, okay, now I realize why the Bible talks about this. And so in Genesis 11, when it's talking about Abraham's father, Terah, and his brother Nahor and Abraham, the Bible casually mentions that Sarah is not able to have children. And it tells us that Nahor is married to their brother Haran's daughter. Look, this is the Bible times, y'all. This is what they did then. Hey, Maisha, happy Tuesday. I'm so excited about this week's Bible study. Like, girl, it's getting better and better. Like, I can't wait to get to chapter 17. But 16 is good, too. And I actually did a podcast episode on this particular chapter. Hey, how you doing? And it's called The God Who Sees Me. And so, hey, how are you? We're going to kind of too much about that, but I am going to mention that when we get a little bit further on in the chapter. But there's so many lessons to be learned from Genesis 16. But I was just talking about when we did Genesis 11, it talked about how the Bible gives us this random information about Sarah. And I always keep things like that in the back of my head when the Bible, like, I feel like that doesn't have anything to do with it, like anything. Why is the Bible mentioning this now? And so now we get to chapter 16 and we see it says, "Now Sarah, Sarai, I don't know how it's pronounced because she's not Sarah yet. She's not the best." And this is what I want y'all to get, y'all. This is so interesting because I thought about this. Sarah is not the best version of herself either. And so you start to see that these people have not become the best versions of themselves. And so what that tells us is that when we are not the best version of ourselves and when we are becoming, we are going to make mistakes. And we are not going to make wise decisions. And so that's what we can get from this chapter right here. Sarai. Okay, that sounds more like it then. Sarai. So that's what we're gonna call her, Sarai. That sounds about right to me. And so the next thing that I noticed in the first verse, it said that she had an Egyptian servant. And I said, that's interesting. Because when we get to Exodus, and even in chapter 15, I don't know if y'all remember, but God tells Abraham that his descendants are gonna be what did he say? Hold on one second. Here it is. He said, the Lord said to Abram, you can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land. They will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. And then you get to chapter 16 and you see that this is the way I think God, this is interesting. It says she had an Egyptian servant. And by the time we get to Exodus, the descendants are the servants. And that's not the way it was supposed to be. But anyways, I just thought about that as I was studying. And so in verse 2, it says, so Sarah said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abraham agreed with Sarai's proposal. So all up until this point, we have been talking about how Abraham has been obedient. We've talked about how he worshiped God. We've talked about how he handled conflict. He handled conflict. But now we get he and his makes a decision to get ahead of God, to rush the promise, because that's what we're talking about. And here's what I want to point out, because I think as we're studying the Bible, we always look at like the strengths of these people, but we forget about that they have weaknesses as well. And so now we start to see weaknesses. We start to see where they have moments where they lack faith, because that's what this is. And we do the same thing too. They're having moments where they are not making wise decisions, because it was not wise for Sarai to tell her husband to sleep with her Egyptian servant. So these people were not perfect. And I think when you start reading the Bible through the lens and see that, okay, well, these people were not perfect, you kind of take some of the pressure off of yourself. You start to give yourself more grace. Because I think, as Christians, we think, oh my God, we can't make mistakes. We can't do nothing wrong. Well, I've made plenty of unwise decisions. Plenty. And the thing is, what happened is I learned from those unwise decisions, though. Yes. Oh, that's a good one, Maisha. She had a lot of influence on him. Yes. Yes. And so I just want you all to see, hey, Abraham was not perfect. And as you as we study the Bible and you start to see, okay, wait, none of these people were perfect. And you start not to feel so bad about yourself. And so then it says, so Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. And so that bit of information is important too, because remember I told you when God called him to go to the land of Canaan, he was 75 years old. And remember, he's not Abram yet. Abraham, he's still Abram. So it's been, hey, Star. So he's not Abram yet. And so the Bible is letting us know that it's been 10 years. Remember, I told y'all that what's between chapter 12 and chapter 17, time. So it's been 10 years. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, I hope nobody listens to this and be like, oh my God, it's going to take me 10 years or 20 years to become the best version of myself. I hope, that you don't get discouraged. It may have taken Abraham that long, but God gives us the Bible. So when we read and study about these people, we can learn from their mistakes. We can learn from them what to do and what not to do. Remember Romans 15, verse 4, we are to learn from the things that happened long ago. So we can learn from them, what not to do. And so maybe we don't want to rush God, but we see that there's time in between us becoming a better version of ourselves, which I ultimately believe that the better version is just us becoming more like Christ. That's all it is. Which is the process of sanctification. And so Abraham is 75 when God called him. We're now in chapter 16, and it's been 10 years. And it says that he's 85 years old. God has given him the promise. He made a covenant with him. That covenant has not come to pass yet. And so when we study this and you think about this, okay, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. And I don't remember exactly how long it's been from the time that God gave him the promise, but we're going to see that in chapter 17, because y'all know I done read ahead. I done read this several times, so I know. But I don't want to get too far ahead, but I want you all to at least see, pay attention to things like this when it's mentioned. So it takes some time for us. And I've said this several times too, like, we don't become better versions of ourselves overnight. It takes time to transformation. Remember, the name change represents spiritual transformation. So all the Bible is showing us is that it takes time. But a lot of times we want to rush. We want to rush that transformation. We want it to go on and happen quickly. And it's not going to do that. When we've been a certain way all our lives, it takes time to change the way we think. It takes time to change our behaviors, all of those things. And I'm just all about giving myself grace and other people grace, because being a Christian, it's not necessarily hard, but it's not easy either. Sometimes it takes us a minute to, like, okay, I'm not going to repeat this same cycle or this same pattern, So I just want to say, give yourself some grace. It takes time to transform, to change into a better version of yourself. And so verse 4, so Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. And so the word contempt just means disrespect. So she got real disrespectful. So already we seeing that this was not a good plan. This was not a wise decision. And so then Sarah said to Abram, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." And so I was like, wait a minute, Sarai. Wait a minute. This was her idea. Was it not? This was her idea. Her husband went along with it. And I thought this just proves that men will be men. Some men, not all men. You know what I'm saying? Because he could have easily said, Sarai, I don't think this is a good idea. Look, we need to wait on the Lord. But he didn't say that. He was like, oh, okay. Hey, if that's what you think we should do, then let's do that. And he did it. So I thought that was interesting, because when most people talk about Abraham, they don't mention this little detail right here, because he's considered the father of faith. He's the father of faith. But again, we mostly look at his strengths, but not his weaknesses. Yeah, Maisha, he could have said no. He could have said no. I don't want no parts of that. But he didn't. So sleeping with his servant was not a wise idea. And so, and basically what she is doing is she's getting ahead of God, and she's taking matters into her own hand. And so you remember me talking about how the Bible, because a lot of people don't realize this, is that the Bible keeps us from making or unnecessary issues or problems for ourselves. So she created an unnecessary problem for herself. Had she just waited on the Lord, and let me say that again, had she just waited on the Lord, had we just waited on the Lord, because we may have not done this particular thing, but there are some other areas of our lives where we have gotten ahead of God. And we're like, okay, it's taking God too long to help me get this job I want. Let me try to do it myself. Let me try to make something happen myself. And that's essentially what she did. And so when we're becoming the best versions of ourselves, we won't always make the wisest decisions. And so I have kind of made peace with that, because there are some decisions that I have made and I was, yes. And what does the Bible tell us? To be patient, right? All throughout the Bible, it tells us to wait. And then it tells us to wait. It tells us how to wait. God tells us to wait, and then he tells us how to wait. Wait patiently for the Lord. And this makes so much sense. This is why he tells us to wait patiently. Else you go on, you end up giving your husband to a whole nother woman. And then y'all have a illegitimate child, a child that I mean, essentially they weren't supposed to have that child. All because she couldn't wait on the Lord. She couldn't wait on the promise. And so we have to stop and think, okay, what is it that we can't wait? Like, why can't we wait? And I literally have been doing some deep diving and thinking, like, even for myself, you know, even as I'm getting on here and I'm teaching these Bible studies, I have to think about what's going on in my actual life. This is the application part right here. This is the application. Okay, what area of my life have I not waited on the promise of God? Where am I trying to do only what he can do? Yes. And I'm glad you pointed that out, Maisha, because here's the thing. Back in those times, a servant is just like an employee. And so she was their servant. And she didn't have any money. And you got to think about this. Abraham has all this wealth. And Hagar is asked to sleep with him and have his baby. And it's like, okay, is she going to say no? Is she supposed to say no? Yes, she should say no in theory. But we got to be realistic. She's not going to say no, because she probably thinks, well, I think maybe part of her probably wanted to do it. And then probably part of her was thinking, well, I want to keep my job. You know what I'm saying? I want to keep my job. And so, yeah. And so we're at verse 5 now. And then it says, when we talked to that part, but I just want to talk about Sarah for a little bit, because she had some misplaced anger, not wanting to take accountability, because that's what I saw there. Yes, that too. Fear. Yep. And so, like I was saying, Sarah had some misplaced anger, because why was she angry at Abraham when this was her idea? She's upset with Abraham and Hagar. Well, Hagar was treating her with disrespect. And so they both was treating each other with disrespect. And that just shows you two wrongs don't make a right. And so she didn't take accountability for a decision that she made. And then this is what I wrote down in my notes. I was like, okay, maybe there's a lack of self-awareness. Because a lot of times we can point the finger at other people, but then we can't see ourselves. Like, she never once said, oh my God, I never should have done this. I never should have suggested this. She went straight to finger pointing and blaming, and blamed Abraham. And I was like, And then that's what we do a lot of time. We blame others and we blame God. And so the other thing that I noticed is that Abraham, because when we read the next verse, it says, Abraham replied, look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. So here, he avoided the conflict. He avoided the conflict here. But when it was with Lot and those herdsmen, he stepped in. But now he's avoiding the conflict. So we see he ain't perfect. He's not perfect. But I thought, that's interesting. And in one season we'll be handling conflict, and then the next season we can avoid it, because that's what we do when we're not the best version of ourselves. So yeah, that was another thing that I noticed. He avoided the whole situation, and he had something to do with it because he agreed to it. It was both of them. And then it says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah, she replied. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. So she ran away from her problems, and the angel of the Lord told her, go right on back, and you need to submit to authority. And here's the thing. A lot of times we do like to run away from our situations, but here God doesn't necessarily want us to run away from. He wants us to confront them. But in a way that's healthy though. And so you can't always run away from your problems and your issues. I don't think that's, like a godly thing to do. And I will admit too that I haven't always. I've ran away from some situations and some conversations, hard conversations. I think it's human to do that. So I thought that was interesting that he told her to go back. Go back. And it also teaches us that running away from your problems doesn't solve anything either. What it teaches us is that when things get hard, to run. And so if we keep doing that, you can't run away from every hard situation. Yeah, even when I read that, Maisha, I was thinking, man, if I were in her situation, I probably would have ran too. And then to be told to go back, I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know, God. Like, can you talk to her or something? But yeah, but it's teaching us to like face our problems. So that's another lesson from this. Like, don't always run away. And I know there have been some times like this was her job. How many times have we ran away from jobs because we didn't like the way we were being treated? This is essentially her. She was a servant. This was her job. So she's running away from conflict, avoiding conflict, running away. And then too, I feel like it was a correction of her attitude. Like teaching us to have a better attitude about certain things. I'm like, I have been known to have a bad attitude, especially at work. Y'all know I've talked about that several times. Like terrible attitude. Oh, y'all gonna do this to me? Oh, I found this job, I'll find another one. I don't care. So that was the other lesson that we can learn. Oh, yes, I did. And I'm not, Maisha, I'll be honest with you. I didn't say that to nobody, but say it directly to the people I was working for. But if you would have caught me, like, you know how be in the break room and all those nurses be talking. Yeah, I found this job. I found another one. Yes, I did. I had a terrible attitude. Terrible attitude. And sometimes that attitude wasn't necessarily always vocal. It would just be me not saying anything out loud, but internally, yes, I had an attitude. I had an attitude. And so I thought about this, you know, even though Hagar may have been justified in running away, it still was not the right thing to do because Sarah was treating her harshly. Yes, yes. And I'm telling you, one of the things that I thought about in hindsight, now when I think about it, you know, we're always asking God to bless us. And if God is taking you, elevating you and taking you higher, you got a nasty attitude, like the same way you got a nasty attitude now is probably the same attitude you're going to have when something goes wrong. And you can't act out every time something offends you, you know. And I think about Jesus and how he responded. You know, I just did a video on that. And I think about how Jesus responded. Like he responded so well. And listen, I have had to pray about that. Self-control, yes. And it's taken a minute to get there because sometimes, some days, and it's like, ooh, the flesh wants to respond in a different way. And so I'm often, especially now that I know Jesus didn't raise his voice and he never shouted, you know what I'm saying? I was like, but he still confronted people and things, but he wasn't confrontational. And I noticed how he spoke directly to the person. He didn't, you know, give subliminals. He didn't do none of that. He spoke directly to you. If he was addressing something, he spoke directly to you. And so I love that in Luke 13, when I was reading that, I was like, man, I was like, this is how we're supposed to respond to our enemies and our critics. And it shames them. And the Bible literally tells us that his enemies were shamed. And he didn't even have to raise his voice. Didn't have to raise his voice, didn't have to shout, didn't have to cuss nobody out. And I've often done this before. When you respond with facts, and you give people facts, you can't argue with facts. And even if they try to argue, like, I'm not going to sit there and argue with you. You can argue by yourself. Yeah, you can argue by yourself. Especially if I know What I'm saying is factual information. And that is so satisfactory to me. That is so satisfactory to know. It's not about how I feel. And I've learned to say, to not do that either. Well, I feel this and no. I'm not even bringing my emotions into it. We're going to talk about straight facts. And I love the fact that he called them hypocrites to their face. He was like, you hypocrites. And then told them why they were hypocrites. So I love that. And so again, that best version of ourselves takes time to get to. But it's like once you do it once or twice, or you have, because hey, we all gonna get a chance to put it into practice at some point or another one. Yes. But yeah, every time I read, and there are so many examples like that where he would shame the Pharisees every single time. Even when, and this the part that gets me, sometimes they didn't even have to say it. He already knew what they were thinking, which means we got to be careful with what we be thinking sometimes. I'd be like, ooh, my thoughts. I know the Lord he knows what I'm thinking. But yeah, and we'll get to that in Genesis as well, where the Lord responded to their thoughts. They were Sarah was the one who laughed to herself and thought she couldn't get pregnant. And then the Lord's like, why is she laughing? You know, I was like, ooh. But anyways, verse 11, we're at verse 11. And it says, the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael. Yes, he hears our thoughts, all of that. She said, you are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. So you see how a lot of the names in the Bible have meaning. Abram had a meaning. Sarai had a meaning. And I want to say this is one of the reasons why God told Abram to leave his family. As we read and study further, you'll see that Nahor had about 8 kids. And so you think about this, Abram, who's supposed to be God's telling you, because remember, God sees who we will become. He doesn't just see us as we are now. And I think that's so important. And so a lot of times we can't see what God sees, and other people can't see what God sees. And so Abraham he's going to be called the father of many. But here he ain't got no children. And you got a brother that got 8 kids. Now, come on now. Realistically, that man would be comparing himself to his brother. He would be doubting himself for real. Even though he still had doubts. And again, we will have moments. He had a moment of doubt. But he still had faith. But for a moment, he had a moment of doubt. And we will do that. We'll have moments of where we doubt or we lack faith. And so the Lord says, the angel says, this son of yours will be a wild man and untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. I thought that was interesting. But I know that I've read somewhere where the people will call Ishmaelites. So they're descendants of Ishmael. So just think about that. And it says, thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, you are the God who sees me. And I did like I said, I did a podcast episode on this because at that moment, this is how I was feeling. So when I read this, I was like, God sees me. Even if nobody else sees me, God sees me. He sees me as a person. He sees my heart. He sees me. Because as you're walking this faith journey out, you will feel like you are invisible, like people don't see you, especially when God is giving you discernment and pretty much everybody is kind of removed from you, and you're gonna be like, oh God, I'm by myself. I don't have anybody. And it's like you will have a moment where you just kind of feel invincible, like nobody cares about you, nobody's thinking about you, nobody's inviting you anywhere. I had those moments, and then in those moments, God comforted me, and He was like, "You don't need to be out everywhere. I need you right here with me." Um, and this like really strengthened my relationship with Him. He was like, "You don't need those distractions." And so sometimes we will feel isolated from. Remember, this says that she was in the wilderness. In the wilderness. And so, yes, that isolation season, it is hard. It is rough, but I will say this is necessary. It's necessary. And and I didn't have a whole lot of friends anyways. And so it wasn't really hard for me to detach from people. I would have moments where I'm like, dang, I wish I had somebody to go and go shopping with, or go to the mall, or besides my daughter. You know what I'm saying? I need some adult conversation. And so it was kind of hard, but I feel like it was necessary, and I'm so glad that I had that season where I was isolated from everyone. And so it says, therefore Hagar used another name to refer to God. Oh, I already read that. She said, she also said, have I truly seen the one who sees me? So that well was named Bir Lahar. I can't pronounce that, y'all, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. So this is letting us know that he's now 86 when Ishmael is born, which means now it's been 11 years. 11 years since God called him. He's in the land of Canaan. He's in the promised land. But he's still not become the best version of himself. He's made some unwise decisions. He's lacked a moment of faith. So I just want y'all to take account of like all these little things, and just think about that as you're studying the Bible. And it just helps, and you really just like, okay, I'm gonna give myself some grace. I'm gonna give myself some grace. Oh, and this, I didn't even see this, but this is what my Bible says, and then we're gonna be done with chapter 16. It says, we have watched 3 people make serious mistakes. Sarai, who took matters into her own hands and gave her servant to Abraham. Abraham, who went along with the plan, but when circumstances began to go wrong, refused to help solve the problem. And then Hagar, who ran away. So we kind of talked about all of that. But it says, in spite of the messy situation, God demonstrated his ability to work in all things to bring about good. So even when we make mistakes, even when we make unwise choices, God is always going to work it out for our good. And I literally have had that to happen several times. Well, God has worked it out for my good. I made a bad decision. God worked it out for my good. And I'm so grateful and thankful for that. Sarah and Abram still received the son they so desperately wanted, and God solved Hagar's problem despite Abram's refusal to get involved. No problem is too complicated for God if you are willing to let him help. And so I like that. That's if you're willing to let God help. And a lot of times people, I wouldn't say they're not willing to let God help. I believe sometimes they just don't think God can help. Sometimes I feel like we get ourselves in situations and we feel like I've made so many mistakes. God is not going to rescue me this time. But that's one of the words in the Bible. Like rescue is in the Bible so many times. Like Google it. Google how many times God says he's going to rescue you. Because he will, because he's faithful. The Bible says his unfailing love. That means love that cannot fail. He will rescue you. It says it so many times. And I think it says it so many times, but God wants to constantly remind you that as your heavenly Father, that he will rescue you no matter the situation. And that's in Psalms 91 verse 3. It says every trap. I will rescue you from every, listen, I think it says every disease and every trap. Let's go. And we're gonna end it on that one. Psalms 91 verse 3. For he will rescue you from every trap and protect you from deadly disease. So not only will he rescue you from every trap, but he also will protect you from deadly disease. Again, this is like the Bible repeats itself over and over. I just did a Psalms 103 verse 3. He will, where is it? Psalms 103 verse 3. He forgives all my sins and heal all my diseases. So when God says all and every, he truly believes that, oh yes, God help me with my unbelief. And remember, Maisha, it was the disciples. Was it the disciples that said that? I forget who it was. I think it was the disciples that said that. Let me go, Mark. Mark chapter 9, verse 24. Oh, yeah, it was the Father. Yes. Look, you typed it as soon as I saw it. It was the Father, yes. The Father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Yeah. And so sometimes you will have moments of unbelief. And that's why God is there to remind you again, hey, I said this. And if I said it, you can bet that it's going to, because when he says it, it is an agreement. It is a promise. Like he can't go back on his word. He cannot go back on his word. If he said it, he's going to do it. And like I said in my video, a lot of times it's not for God, it's for us to remember. Like the Bible is so repetitive, y'all. But it's repetitive for a reason. God constantly reminding us, I said I'm going to do this. So even when you feel discouraged, when you feel doubt, When you feel all of these things, you can go back to his word, and then you can remember God is not a man that he should lie. If he said he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And so you have to go back to yourself. You have to be like, okay, am I being impatient? Am I trying to rush God? Am I trying to rush the process? And I feel like there's so much fulfillment in slowing down and just like enjoying the journey that we're on. And even sometimes I've gotten caught up in trying to rush God and trying to like make things happen sooner. And then I have to think about it. I'm like, for what though? Like, what's the rush? Because once you get to one thing, then it's gonna be something else. Like, oh God, you know what I'm saying? I'm living in some of my answered prayers. Like I am, but it's like, oh, here's something else that I have a desire for. And it's like, at some point, I really have been thinking about this lately. Like, I just need to like chillax. Just chillax, go with the flow. And it takes a lot of pressure off. And I think, I just want to enjoy the journey. I want to enjoy the journey of me becoming a better version of myself. Because I'm not even the best version of myself right now. And as long as I'm, putting forth the effort to do that, to be that. And I think that's just all God wants from all of us. It's just getting to how he originally intended us to be, So, but yeah. But all right, y'all, that is it for this week's Bible study. We will be in chapter 17 next week, and that is where he becomes Abraham. Abram becomes Abraham, and we're going to talk about that. There's a lot to unpack in chapter 17, so go ahead and read ahead. If you have any questions, bring them to Bible study so we can talk about it and discuss it. So I hope y'all have a good night and a good rest of your week, and I will see you all next week. Bye.